Hello. I can see everybody filtering into the webinar, which is great. Just as a tech check, can you hear me? I am hoping that all my tech is working, that you can put messages in the chat and in the Q&A if you need to. Feel free to do that throughout the webinar, but I just need to know you can hear me first. Anyone, let me know where you're coming in from today too. You can see I have my raincoat in the background, which is a sign of what it was like on my walk to work this morning, a little bit wet. Hello from Red Bank Plains in Queensland. Hello, Brisbane for Danielle. Great, you can hear me. All right, well, now that I'm confident that you can hear me, I will, and Tanya can hear me. Hi, Tanya, great to see you. And Casey is from HR in Nowra in New South Wales. Great. All right. Well, I will share my screen and get started. Usually take about 30 minutes to go through these. So I'm not sure why. Oh, there we go. Look, that's new tech. So we're talking about employment agreements for doctors and including IMGs and registrars into this mix. And look, you would be disappointed if I didn't start with a disclaimer. So this presentation is for general guidance only. Legal advice should be taken in relation to specific actions on specific issues because, as we know, every environment is different. The way that you operate is different from every other medical practice is what we found, and that really getting legal advice that is tailored for your experience is what's required. Who am I? Let me start with that if we haven't met before. It's nice to meet you. I am Sarah Bartholomew's. I've been running my legal practice, ULegal, for 11 years, 12 in October, and I come from a family of doctors. So I decided to specialise in protecting medical practices quite a number of years ago now. And it feels like for me and my team that we get to do good in the world by doing that because we know that we're helping people who help people and heal people and make the world a better place, which means that we're also making the world a better place is our theory. I've also written a book, Growing a Medical Practice from Frustration to a High Performance Business. And it's in its second edition. It is really a guidebook for medical practice owners who don't always get training in how to run a business, more in the medical side of things. So I thought that would be a useful guidebook for people, and I get feedback every week that it is. So that's very satisfying and makes the time and effort that I spent in putting it together feel very worthwhile. All right, let's have a look at why employment agreements matter more than ever when it comes to doctors. Really, what you might have realised is the medical workforce really is changing a lot. So I'm not going to dive straight into the details. I do want to have a step back and look at why employment agreements have become such a hot topic in this sector. We really know there's some major changes happening, which has been driven by demographic shifts and policy and legal changes, creating more pressure on compliance for medical practice owners. Traditionally, independent relationships had been more popular amongst medical practices and doctors, but now we're starting to see more practices choosing to engage doctors, especially international medical graduates and registrar doctors for those practices that are teaching practices as employees. This shift is partially due to increased legal scrutiny around independent practitioner arrangements, but also because many practice owners have realised the benefits of taking a more proactive approach to risk management and compliance rather than just winging it like they might have done in the past. The classification of a doctor as an independent practitioner or employee isn't just a technicality. It has real-world consequences. Getting it wrong can lead to liability for unpaid entitlements, payroll tax, and even potentially immigration issues when it comes to IMGs. The law doesn't let you choose the preferred label. It looks at the actual relationship in the contract and in practice. That's why it's so important to have employment agreements that are fit for purpose and tailored to the way your practice actually genuinely operates. So, with that in mind, let's explore the key things that you need to know to get your agreements right and avoid the common pitfalls that can trip up even well-intentioned practices. And honestly, they're the ones that we work with. We really work with practices who are wanting to get things right and doing the right thing by their staff, by their patients, and by their owners as well. So on that, let me have a look at the key components of employment agreements for you. We talk about them, but it can be useful to take a step back for a moment and start by talking about what they should include, and then I'll discuss how it differs from an independent practitioner agreement. An employment agreement sets out the legally binding relationship between a practice and a doctor engaged as an employee. These agreements are governed by the Commonwealth Fair Work Act and must comply with the National Employment Standards. The agreement should clearly describe the doctor's clinical and administrative responsibilities, the expected hours of work, how rostering will be handled, but it also must outline remuneration, including whether the doctor is paid a salary, by the hour, or on another basis, and must include superannuation contributions, PAYG withholding tax, which are all the employer's responsibility. Employees are entitled to paid leave, including annual leave, personal leave, and parental leave. Casual employees are the exception, of course, to the annual leave and personal leave part, and parental leave. So keep that in mind. But any extra benefits like CPD allowances should be clearly stated in the agreement. The contract should also address termination, how much notice is required, grounds for dismissal, and any restraints on the doctor working for a competitor or soliciting patients or staff after they leave. Finally, the agreement should refer to the relevant governing law. When employing registrars, there's also the National Terms and Conditions for the Employment of Registrars, or the NTCER, as they're commonly referred to, which outline the employment terms and conditions for GP registrars, including their salaries, annual leave, and so on. And we know that GP registrars must be employees. There's no option for them to be independent practitioners. So what's the difference then? I've just been talking a lot about independent practitioners. Well, briefly, independent practitioners tend to have a lot of control and independence over the hours that they work and how they perform their work. They typically provide their own equipment like laptops, medical bags. They may share specialized practice equipment if necessary, but they always have their own stethoscope, for example, and potentially other equipment that they need to personally own. Independent practitioners can delegate or subcontract their work, and they typically set their own fees or are paid based on outcomes as agreed in their contracts. They are responsible for their own tax obligations and must hold their own professional indemnity insurance, which is actually the case for employee doctors as well. They hold their own professional indemnity insurance. But in this case, the independent practitioner has the control and also bears the risk of their business. So we often see in independent practitioner agreements other forms of insurance being required to have them renting a room in the practice. The difference is employees are subject to more control by the practice, such as being required to attend team meetings before shifts, being on call after hours, or having restrictions on break times and patient scheduling. They rely on the practice to provide the tools and equipment needed to perform their role and are not able to delegate their work. Payment is often based on the time worked, which might be per hour or day or session, and the practice may assume more of the associated risk, especially if the practitioner doesn't have all of the insurances, or lacks independence in the sense that they still need to have supervision of their work. International medical graduates and registrar doctors do have unique engagement requirements. They both require formal supervision under the Medical Board of Australia. And due to this supervision and the need for certain levels of control to be exercised by the practice over rosters, duties, and performance, they usually get engaged as employees rather than independent practitioners. For registrars, employment is often mandatory, as I said earlier. For example, the RACGP's AGPT program requires it. The General Practice Registrars Australia also recommends employment for all registrars to ensure proper legal and workplace protections. International medical graduates with provisional or limited registration are typically subject to visa conditions and also align with employment, not independent practice, is our strong recommendation. We know that IMGs have all different sorts of arrangements with different medical practices, but given the requirement for supervision and the support that they need, we really recommend that they are employees. If they're not, either way, managing supervision effectively, we do recommend a supervision agreement, whether they're an employment arrangement or an independent practitioner arrangement. This helps clarify the responsibilities, ensures compliance with regulations, and supports a structured and safe learning environment for the doctor while protecting the practice, which, as I mentioned earlier, is always our number one priority. It supports compliance, protects the practice, and helps deliver high-quality patient care in a training environment. Therefore, as I pointed out, for both compliance and strategic reasons, we're seeing a rise in practices moving to employment models. Employment agreements offer a lot of benefit for practices, such as allowing practices to set hours, availability, and expectations. They can also support a stronger team integration and alignment with clinical governance. It also reduces the risk from the outset of back pay claims, superannuation issues, and payroll tax reassessments. It also simplifies HR and legal obligations, helping to promote sustainable growth and sustainability. From an employee perspective, the employee gets fair work protections such as leave, super, and honestly, so many doctors who are in their mid or late career have no super at all. So I see this as a huge bonus for the doctors themselves. They are protected in relation to unfair dismissal laws, which can attract, it can help you attract quality staff having all of these protections in place. Employment can be a smarter, safer business decision for medical practices and for doctors themselves. Some common pitfalls that we see in reviewing medical practices is there are a few, and these are the things that come up time and again. So I wanted to go through them because even though they might seem small, they can have significant legal and financial consequences if they're not addressed. A worrying trend is the increasing use of agreements purchased or downloaded from professional associations, business coaches, accountants, and other non-lawyers. We understand that medical practices are looking to minimise costs wherever possible, and we are all for that where it's safe to do so. But opting for off-the-shelf templated agreements, which do not consider your practice's unique circumstances, is never the solution. Generic templates are not designed to reflect the complexities of your specific practice, such as your staffing structure, service model, financial arrangements, or compliance obligations. Critical provisions like dispute resolution, termination clauses, top-up billing clauses, supervision obligations, and patient handover processes often require careful, customised drafting. Without this, medical practices risk finding themselves tied in an unclear and unenforceable terms when the issues arise. We've also seen contracts that reference the wrong jurisdiction. This happens when templates are sourced from international websites or even from other Australian states without checking if they're appropriate. Each state and territory has its own laws, and using the wrong framework can make the agreement unenforceable or increase your legal exposure unnecessarily. The most common problem we see is people trying to use a general employment agreement, which may be perfect for admin staff, but for a doctor, there are unique clauses that need to be in doctors' agreements that you wouldn't otherwise find in an admin agreement. For example, those related to their professional obligations or insurance. Another major risk we see is outdated employment agreements. Many practices still use agreements that were drafted years ago and haven't been reviewed or updated since. The law is constantly changing, and this space is constantly changing, particularly at the moment. We've seen a lot of changes over the last few years. So what was legally compliant 2 years ago may now contain unfair contract terms or misupdates to modern awards, making parts of the agreement unenforceable. The way your practice operates may have also evolved. Maybe you should have introduced new rostering systems, supervision agreements, or financial models that are not captured in the old agreements. Even if your agreements were once drafted by a lawyer, they still need regular review to stay aligned with both the law and your current business practices. We therefore recommend reviewing and updating your agreements regularly, maybe every 12 months or so, or for each new employee, depending on how often you're hiring. This proactive step can help save you significant time, cost, and stress down the track, and helps avoid compliance risks to ensure your agreements reflect how your practice actually operates today. And finally, a big one, misclassifying workers. If you engage someone as an independent practitioner, but the working arrangement reflects that of an employee, your practice may be liable for unpaid super, leave entitlements, and other obligations. It's critical that the contract and the actual working relationship are aligned. Otherwise, you may face claims from the ATO or Fair Work, and these can be very distracting. We've had clients who have experienced this, and it takes the focus away from what they should be doing or what they would prefer to be doing, which is ensuring that their practice is thriving. This is particularly the case now more than ever because in mid-2024, changes came into the Fair Work Act came into effect. These changes emphasise the importance of taking a holistic view of the relationship, i.e., it is not enough to just rely on what the contract says, but also how it's carried out in real life. Therefore, even if the contract labels someone an independent practitioner, if the working conditions resemble employment, they may legally be considered an employee. This is another reason why it's so important to have carefully drafted employment agreements that truly reflect the reality of how doctors work in your practice to protect both your business and its doctors from costly compliance risks. So, how do you avoid these pitfalls? Using tailored agreements is the absolute first and foremost that are drafted by professionals. We're all in for creativity and DIY projects, just not in this space. Your practice is unique, and so are the risks you face. A generic or reused contract is likely to not reflect the nuances of how your practice operates or comply with current employment law. At ULegal, we specialise in medical practices. We work with you to understand the specific risks in your practice and develop tailored agreements that help you mitigate and manage those risks while ensuring they're legally compliant with the laws in your state and territory. Investing in tailored legal agreements ensures clarity, reduces the risk of costly disputes or regulatory breaches, and provides you with peace of mind. Second, review and update contracts regularly. Set a reminder to review your agreements at least once a year or whenever there's a major change in the law and how your practice operates. This keeps you aligned with the current legal obligations and reduces the risk of disputes down the track. One easy way to stay on top of changes is to subscribe to legal or industry newsletters. You probably get AMA newsletters or RACGP newsletters if you're a GP, but if you're not already getting those, sign up, and if you're not getting our ULegal updates, you can jump on our newsletter list when we share the practical tips. where we share practical tips and important changes that matter to medical practices like yours. Classify employment relationships correctly. Finally, take the time to properly assess whether someone is an independent practitioner or is an employee. The contract needs to reflect the actual working relationship. Otherwise, you could be exposed to serious consequences from Fair Work or the ATO, like back pay, superannuation, liabilities, or penalties. If you're unsure, we can help you review the arrangement and provide clear advice to make sure you're classifying and contracting correctly from the start. To wrap up today's webinar and move to questions shortly, I'm going to revisit the key takeaways to keep in mind when it comes to employment agreements and protecting your practice. Employment agreements play a critical role in protecting both your practice and your doctors. It's not simply enough to have an agreement. It needs to reflect the actual working relationship, especially when distinguishing between employees and independent practitioners. Misclassification is one of the biggest risks we see in medical practices and can lead to serious legal and financial consequences, including back pay claims, unpaid superannuation and penalties from the ATO and Fair Work. For international medical graduates and registrars, employment is often not just recommended but required due to supervision and visa obligations. Your agreements should clearly set out roles, responsibilities, pay structures, leave entitlements, and termination terms as well. It's also crucial to avoid the trap of using generic or outdated templates. These rarely fit with the unique needs of your practice and leave you exposed. Instead, invest in tailored legal documents and make sure you review them regularly as the law and your business evolve. Remember, doing so isn't just about compliance. It's about building a strong, secure foundation for your practice's long-term success and giving you peace of mind when you're meeting your obligations while supporting your doctors to thrive. That is, one of our main objectives, as I said before. So how can we help? Well, we have fast-track solutions for the preparation of employment agreements for GPs or doctors, and also employment agreements specifically for registrar doctors. So we offer these to make sure that it's simple to engage with us and that you understand what we'll be doing for the money that we're setting out the scope for. We can also assist with supervision agreements that meet medical board and college requirements. And more generally, we offer practice-wide legal reviews to ensure compliance with Fair Work, tax, superannuation, and more. Our experience working with many medical practices means we understand the unique challenges you face and how to mitigate risk without making it at all complicated. We know it can be very overwhelming. I'm keen to take some questions if you have any. These are how to get in touch with us. My email address is there, booking link to book a call. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And also we have a Facebook group, which you're welcome to join. The link's there to ask questions in, and we share regular updates in there too. So if you're not already in New Legal for Doctors, feel free to join there. Now I've broken that, I'm going to stop sharing and have a look at you and see if you've got any questions. So yes, please do ask them. Maria, what sort of contract will a GP have if the independent contractor cannot delegate their duties, which is usually the case? Look, Maria, as a lawyer, I'm going to say it depends. We would need to have a look at the contract to be able to establish how important the delegation clause is. In some that we've reviewed, it means that the practice should be paying superannuation if the doctor is engaged principally for their labour. And so maybe not other forms of employment law would apply. So that's the difficult thing about this space, is it's really there's lots of overlapping state and territory laws that are relevant. And so that's why questions that seem simple sometimes require many hours of consideration. So Maria, feel free to send me through the agreement you're talking about, and I can take a look at that for sure. Any other questions that have come out of that? Do love hearing from you, and also you also learn so much from hearing from others. So if there's no questions, I'd love to hear your reflections. Do you have any actions that you're going to take? Are you going to review your existing agreements? Are you working on bringing on a IMG? What's come up? Tracy says, how do we enforce a registrar contract? That really depends on what you mean by enforcing the registrar contract, Tracy. It might be that they're not turning up to work, if that's what you mean, or I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Maybe you can be a little bit more specific. You're welcome, Casey, and you're welcome, Zoe. Glad it was helpful and useful for your time. Tracy, if you don't want to put it in the chat, you're welcome to reach out to me independently, because there should be terms in a registrar contract that sort of set out how to terminate, or how they should be behaving. They make promises in those contracts just like employers do. You've had registrars that have supplied a medical certificate from June till the end of the team and have end of the term and have not returned. It might be worth getting some advice on that in terms of what you need, but if they're not well, then that's challenging. If they may not be able to complete their term if they're not able to work, because the supervision requirement may not be met, as well as the hours. So happy to have a look at the agreement, Tracy, if you want to email it through. Chris says, if a doctor is considered an employee for payroll tax purposes, does this mean they must also be an employee rather than a contractor? The answer to that is not always, Chris. It really depends on your agreement. But payroll tax is a state and territory-based law, whereas the other employment requirements are often federal laws. So it's one of those ones that I would really suggest getting specific legal advice on to make sure that you're not needing to be paying super and other leave requirements. We've had some practices that people who've worked there for years and years, like think 30 years, have then asked for long service leave, which is a huge burden for practices to bear. So another reason to have it checked if there's been someone there for a long time. Eileen says, you have an IMG registrar level 2 who insisted on independent contract rather employment. It could be something you need to look at. You're not the first person that we've heard say that. It's really the practice that takes the risk on the arrangement not being correct. And so it's just whether it's worth taking the risk for you. But usually with the supervision requirements, we recommend them being employee, but it's definitely worth looking at to make sure that you're protected. And it might simply be putting in place a supervision agreement to make sure that the supervision arrangement is formalized, and that all of the visa requirements are being met, if it's possible for them to be an independent practitioner. Chris says, can they still be a contract even if you have to pay payroll tax? They might be, yes, is the answer, Chris. But you might be paying payroll tax for them as an employee. If they are considered an employee under the payroll tax legislation, it's worth looking at whether they are considered an employee under other provisions of Fair Work as well, because that is a risk in the circumstance you're describing. Tracy, you have also said that your registrar who is on a sick sick leave, says they were overseas on holidays for 4 weeks, and then supplied the certificate to say they were unfit for the rest of the term. It sounds like there's definitely a process that you could consider going through with that registrar. If you do have that information, Tracy, it's something that's worth looking into, particularly in relation to securing your relationship with the college for future registrars, I think. And it's not uncommon. We've had other practices that we've worked with who've had to let registrars go for various reasons. Oliver, you might be the last question because we've just ticked over to that half an hour point. When a self-employed GP enters into an agreement with a service company for the service company to provide what the GPs to conduct their practice in that location, the service company is the contractor, not the GP. Is that correct? In that arrangement, the service company is providing a service, so it's a service provider to the GP. It's not really, the language of contractor isn't really used in that arrangement, Oliver. It's more a service that's being provided to the GP. The difficulty with general practice, of course, is that you need to be accredited and you need to have certain things from those independent GPs potentially. And so how you deal with that can be covered in other arrangements if they need to be, for example, on a poisons license. We've dealt with that before. Or if they need to help with some sort of compliance that can cause issues when the employee when the GP might simply be a tenant of the establishment. Okay, we've got more questions. You guys, if you need to go, please do. I'll keep asking questions as they're popping up, but I understand that I only am in your calendar for 30 minutes. Sige says, how enforceable are contract term lengths, consequences for the contractor breaking early? And that depends, Sige, on the agreement, which you might see is common, a common response. If it's an IMG, independent contractor arrangement, or an employment agreement, it will really depend on what the agreement says about consequences for breaking it early, and what the law says in the circumstances as well. So very happy to have a look at your contract if you want to send it through for us to take a look through and provide you with some advice on as well. Maria, are you familiar with what they call tenant contractor, where the agreement is different from that of a contractor? Yes, Maria, that's the same question that Oliver just asked, really. It's a license arrangement. A tenancy, the GP takes a tenancy, and then the service entity provides certain services that might include a nurse, it might include reception services, it might include them somebody taking money for the doctor. Those sorts of services can also be called a tenant-doctor arrangement. So yes, that's why I referred throughout the webinar to independent practitioners rather than contractors. So I think that's our last question, unless there's anything else popping up. Thank you all so much for your interaction and for coming today. Seems like a relevant topic, and my next webinar next month is in August, and it's going to be about the payroll tax legislation as it is at the moment, the landscape in every state and territory, and update. So I'll be sending out emails about that. If you're registered to this, you'll be on the list. And yeah, feel free to reach out. There's lots of different ways to get in touch. Looking forward to being in touch. And Joe, yes, the webinar will be sent out in the next few days after in an email to everyone who registered. So good question. All right. Look forward to being in touch. Talk soon. Bye.